What's up, everybody? Welcome to lesson 11 from module 3. Today we're going to be talking about subtracting and subtracting fractions, and what we're going to be doing is basically kind of the same thing that we did in the previous couple of lessons, where we're getting rid of our rectangles that we're drawing, and we're just going to be putting those units numerically. So this should be fairly familiar. It's got a couple of different twists. We'll get to those, but let's jump right in by taking a look at 1/3, subtracting 1/5. So 1/3 minus 1/5. And traditionally, when we were subtracting, we would have taken our rectangle. We would have drawn our rectangle. We would have made 1/3. We would have filled in the 1, and that shows 1/3. And we would have subtracted out our 1/5. 1/5, and there's just one of them there. And put that 1/5 over here, buddy. Okay, and what I would have done then is I would have turned this into thirds. I would have cut this into fifths to make like units so that I can go about subtracting them. And I would realize that I'm doing 15ths because I have 3 rows of 5 here, or 5 rows of 3 here, and I'm dealing with myself with 15ths. Okay, awesome. And I would have said, well, I need to subtract 1, 2, 3. I need to take away 3 of those 15ths from over here, and I would have come over. I would have checked 1 off, I would have checked 2 off, I would have checked 3 off, and I would have realized that I had 1, 2 15ths left over. And if I do that numerically over here, I would say I had 5 15ths, and I'm subtracting 3 15ths to get a difference of 2 15ths, and I would have found my answer. So what we're going to start to do now is to write those numerically, so that instead of using this here, right, we're just going to take our 1/3 and 1/5 and realize that we need to turn them directly into 15ths. And we can do that by saying, well, our 1/3 is going to be multiplied by 5 over 5 to get our 15ths. And that's going to be 5 15ths. And then we're going to do our 1/5. And 1/5 multiplied by something is going to equal 15ths as well. Multiply it by 3 over 3. I'm getting 3 15ths. And so then I'm going to use these equations, these numerical equations, instead of this to ultimately get to this and to my solution. Sweet. So let's go ahead and take a look at problem 1. 3/5 minus 1/6. All right. So let's take a look. I got 5 and I got 6, and I know that I could multiply 5 by 6, and that would give me a multiple, right? And 5 by 6 would be 30. 5 times 6 is 30. So let's deal with 30ths. That's going to be our common denominator. This is what we know we're going to deal with here. So let's turn our 3/5 into 30ths by multiplying. And we're going to get something. 30 is 5 times 6, right? And 6 over 6. So 3 times 6 would be 18. And so I'm dealing with 18 30ths here. And let's turn our 1/6 into 30ths. We're going to multiply it by something to get 30ths, right? And we know that we multiplied it by 5. 6 times 5 is 30. And so then 1 times 5 would be 5. And so I've just transformed, I've renamed my 3/5 and my 1/6 to be 30ths so we can subtract them. And I'm going to rewrite the equation up here. 3/5 became 18 30ths. And I'm going to subtract out 5 30ths. And 18 minus 5 is 13 30ths. Pretty easy, right? Pretty straightforward. It's just like what we were doing with addition, except subtraction. No worries. Awesome. Let's move on to problem 2. Here in problem 2, we're going to do 1 3/4. We're going to subtract out 3/5. And so here with 1 3/4 minus 3/5, we're dealing with this mixed number over here, and we got to figure out what to do with that guy. So there's a couple different methods that we can do here. I'm going to show you 2 different methods, but they're both pretty straightforward. It's not really a big deal here. So the first one is let's just space these 2 out here. Let's turn this into, I got 1, and over here I got 3/4. Easy, okay? And we're going to deal with that. And this is 1 plus my 3/4, and we're going to subtract out my 3/5, okay? So now I need to figure these guys out as far as what's their common denominator. I have 4 and I have 5. 4 and 5 would be 20, right? So we're going to turn them into 20ths. I got 3/4, and I need to get it to 20ths. I know I'm going to multiply 4 by 5, and I need to do 3 by 5. And 3 by 5 would be 15, and so I know I have 15 20ths. I'm going to rewrite this whole thing over here, just so I just don't confuse myself. I have 1. I'm putting a plus in there just to remind myself that I'm not subtracting that 1, that 1 is a part of this whole thing. And I know that I need to subtract out 15 20ths. Sorry, I shouldn't put that there. I'm not going to put that there. 15 20ths, and I'm going to subtract out my 3/5, which I need to put into 20ths. So 3/5, and I need to multiply that by 4/4 to get to my 20ths. And 3 and 4 is 12, so I have 12 20ths. So I'm going to subtract 12 20ths from 15. I can do this straight up without having to even delve into my 1, so I'm just going to leave my 1 there. 15 minus 12 leaves me with 3. That leaves me with 3 20ths. So I have my 1 and I have my 3 20ths, and I have arrived at an answer. That's super awesome. But I want to show you a second alternate way to do this. This is still problem 2, and this is still 1 3/4 minus 3/5. And you can do either method. It's totally fine. It's not a big deal. The second method only involves this right here, our mixed number. And instead of saying 1 3/4, well, I know 1, that would be 4/4, right? And I have my 3/4. So what I could do is I could say 1 3/4. Well, I could combine that to say, well, I have 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7/4. And then I could do 7/4 minus 3/5. And I don't even need to worry about having that whole number here. We would do the same thing. Multiply it by 5. We need to get to the 20ths, okay? So 7/4 times 5/5 equals, well, that's 20ths. That's our common denominator. And 7 times 5 is 35. And so I would be doing 35 20ths, and I would subtract out my 3/5. And I would do that, multiply that by 4, right? Which would ultimately give me 12 20ths. And so I would do 35 20ths minus 12 20ths. And 35 minus 12, I'm going to do that over here on the side. Boop-a-dee-boo. 5 minus 2 is 3, and that would be 2. So I would end up with 23 20ths. And then I would just say to myself, okay, well, that's 1 3/20. And I would arrive at the same answer. And let me just go back over this real quick to show you what I did. All I did was, instead of dealing with my 1 here, I put my 1 into 4/4 and then added those two together to get 7/4, so that when I was over here, I don't have to worry about my 1. I can just do this. So either one of those methods is fine. It kind of depends on just how you work and what method you find would be best for you. Okay? All right. Let's do 2 more problems. How's that sound? And we're going to introduce one more thing here. I'm going to have, no, not 4. I'm going to have 3 3/5 minus 2 1/2. I want you to pause it right now, and I want you to try solving this using the methods that we just did, and I want you to come back, see how you did compared to what I have. Sound good? Okay. Hey, welcome back. Good job. I hope you did awesome. Remember, there's 2 methods that we can do here. What I'm going to do is just draw a line down it. I'm going to say I have method 1, and over here I'll do method 2. Sound good? 3 3/5 minus 2 1/2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn. I'm going to take care of my 3 minus 2 right away. I just don't even want to deal with it. 3 minus 2 is 1, so I have 1, and then I have 3/5. I'm going to make sure and then I have 1/2. So I just took care of the 3 and the 2. Don't even need to worry about it. Got my 3/5 minus my 1/2. Awesome. Okay, 5 and 2, we're going to deal with tenths. That's going to be our common denominator, and tenths. So we're going to double these numbers, okay? Double this 3. And when I double the 3, or if you're not sure what the heck I'm talking about here, I'm going to multiply it by 2, right, to get to 10. So I'm going to double my 3 to get 6, so I have 6 tenths. And here I have 1/2, which I'm going to multiply by 5 to get to 5 tenths. Awesome. So I have 1, and I have 6 tenths minus 5 tenths. And I know that 6 minus 5 equals 1, right? So I have 1 and 1/10. If I did that same thing over here, but I did what I used to do, which was, did what I used to do. What am I talking about? I did the method 2, where I have my 3 3/5, and I split that out, and I know that 3, how many fifths would that be if there's 3 total? Well, it's 5 fifths would be 1. So that would be 15 fifths would be 3 total. I hope that makes sense. And I also have my 3/5 here. What I could do is I could just take those two and add those up, and that would be 18 total fifths, which is a little bit silly. And then what I would do, hang on a second. You know, I did this wrong for a second. Hang on. Take me back. What I'm going to do is I'm still going to deal with that whole number. Sorry, it's late on a Friday night. I want to go home. I'm still going to deal with that whole number first. I'm still going to take my 3 minus my 2 and get to my 1. So I'm going to have 1 3/5 minus my 1/2. And then I'm going to go about doing that, where I'm going to have my 5/5, and I'm going to have my 3/5, and that's going to total up to be 8/5. And I'm going to do 8/5 minus 1/2. I could have done it the other way still, honestly, but this way is just easier. I don't need to worry about dealing with those whole numbers. I have 8/5 minus 1/2, and I would do the same thing. I would turn them into tenths, and I would ultimately get my answer. Okay. One more problem. Like I said, it's Friday. I want to get out of here. My kids are like, "Come pick me up." Let's do 5 3/4 minus 3 1/6. We're gonna do the first things first. Let's take care of these whole numbers. Get those out of the way. 5 minus 3 is 2. And so now all I'm left with is my 3/4 subtracting my 1/6. If I look at 6 and 4, 6 times 4, 6, 12, 18 is 24. I think that sounds like a pretty good number. Oh, wait, I could do 24s, but couldn't I do something else as well? Yeah, because 6 times 2 is 12, and 4 times 3 is 12. So I could also use my 12, couldn't I? Sure could. So let's do, I don't know, you pick. 12ths or 24ths? I'm going to do 12ths. Let's do that one. And so let's try it. Here we go. 3/4. Let's turn our 3/4 into 12ths. Let's do that. 4 times 3, and this one times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9. That gives me 9/12ths. Okay. So I'm going to rewrite my problem over here. 2. And I still have that, and I'm going to subtract my 9/12ths. I'm going to subtract this 1/6. So I got to turn 1/6 into 12th. Well, I'm just going to double my 6. So I'm just going to double my 1. I'll show you that. 1/6. I'm going to double it. Now I equal 2/12ths. So 9/12ths minus 2/12ths. Well, that's going to give me 9 minus 2. 9 is 7/12ths. So I have 2 and 7/12ths. Hey, that's rocking. That sounds great. I could also go with 24ths, but I think the 12ths makes things just a little bit easier for me. If I was doing my method 2, I would have 2 and 3/4, and I would turn that, this would be fourths right here, if I need to turn this into fourths. Well, how many fourths? I could do, this would be 4/4 and 4/4, right? And 4/4 and 4/4, because that's 1 and that's 1. Well, that would be 8/4. And so I would have 8/4, and I would have to add in my 3/4. So that would be 9, 10. That would be 11/4. And I would do 11/4 minus my 1/6, and that would be my ultimate problem. So kind of depends on which way you're looking at it. I hope this makes sense. I hope you guys are doing great on this one. Just remember, it's the same thing that we've been doing. Well, with addition, the same thing we just did in lesson 9 that we're doing here in lesson 11. So you know, you're just resizing. The only thing different in this instance is our subtraction, that we're dealing with our 5 and our 3, our whole numbers, and we're just subtracting those first. And so, and it's kind of like us, where we're adding them first, so it's not really that big of a deal. Anyways, this is your homework lesson, so rock it out, And if you have any problems, post questions and all that, I'll be around to listen to them and to answer them. And, you know, peace out. You guys rock this. You're doing great. Okay? Bye-bye.